The Empire had watched humanity for 300 years. They studied the strange species from distant observation posts. They recorded human behavior, culture, and military capabilities. The Council believed they understood everything about these soft creatures who built their colonies across the Orion Arm. They saw humans as weak, emotional, and primitive. The decision to attack seemed logical. The decision would become the greatest mistake in history. Commander stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion. He looked at the holographic display showing 12 human colonies spread across 5 star systems. These colonies held valuable resources. They controlled important trade routes. The Wanted them smiled with his 3 jaws as he gave the order. 600 warships moved forward. The invasion began on a peaceful morning when human children played in parks and farmers worked their fields. The first colony to fall was New Geneva. They bombarded the planet from orbit. They destroyed defense platforms within hours. Their ground forces landed in waves of thousands. The humans fought back with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered and watched the battle reports with satisfaction. Everything happened according to plan. The other 11 colonies fell in similar fashion over the next 2 weeks. They captured 3 million human survivors. They placed them in containment camps. They sent a message to Earth demanding surrender. They expected fear. They expected submission. They did not expect what came next. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire through a dry forest. Every screen showed images of burning colonies. Every speaker carried the voices of survivors describing the attack. The human population did not react with fear. Something older awakened in their hearts. Something buried deep in their genetic memory. They had made a terrible calculation error. They had studied human behavior during times of peace. They had never seen what humans became during times of war. Admiral Sarah received command of the response fleet. She was 63 years old with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Her military record included 12 major engagements and 0 defeats. When she spoke to her crew, her voice was calm and cold like deep space itself. She told them they were not going to negotiate. They were not going to ask for the colonies back. They were going to take them. They were going to make them understand a simple truth. You do not touch human children. You do not burn human homes. You do not cage human families. The human fleet gathered at the edge of the Sol system. 300 warships answered the call. But these were not the peaceful exploration vessels they had observed. These were different machines entirely. Humanity had kept secrets from the watching eyes. Deep beneath mountain ranges and ocean floors, humans had built weapons that never appeared in any scan. They called this fleet the Sleeping Giants. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a moon. Each crew member volunteered for what many believed was a suicide mission. None of them cared about survival. They cared only about revenge. The patrol ships detected the human fleet entering their territory. They sent warnings to Commander. He laughed at the reports. 300 ships against his 600. The mathematics seemed simple. He ordered his fleet to intercept the humans at the nebula. He planned to destroy them quickly and continue his conquest. His confidence would cost him everything. The 2 fleets met in the purple clouds of the nebula, ordered the standard attack formation. His ships spread out in a crescent shape designed to surround enemies. Admiral watched the movements on her tactical display. She had studied their tactics for 3 decades. She knew every pattern they used. She knew their weaknesses. She gave a single order. The human fleet changed formation in perfect coordination. They formed a shape they had never seen. They called it the Broken Arrow. The battle lasted 7 hours. The expected organized combat with clear rules. They received chaos and fury instead. Human ships moved with reckless aggression. They rammed damaged vessels. They flew into obvious traps, then detonated nuclear weapons inside enemy formations. Pilots ejected from dying ships, then fired personal weapons at passing cruisers. The tactical computers could not predict human behavior. Their models assumed enemies would try to survive. These humans seemed to have no such desire. Commander watched his fleet die around him. He could not understand what he witnessed. 2 of his destroyers pursued a damaged human frigate. The frigate turned suddenly and flew directly between them. The human captain triggered the engine core to explode. All three ships vanished in white fire. The human crew had chosen death to take enemies with them, felt something he had never experienced. He felt fear. The battle ended with 200 ships destroyed or disabled. The humans lost 180 vessels, but the survivors pushed forward without stopping to count their dead. They continued toward the occupied colonies. Admiral sent a message too. She told him to release the prisoners and leave human space. She gave him one chance. He refused to answer. He would regret this silence. The liberation of the colonies began with New Geneva. The remaining human ships dropped from orbit like angry gods. They landed ground forces that fought with terrible efficiency. Human soldiers did not take prisoners during the first 3 days. They had seen what they did to their people. They had seen the camps. They had seen the bodies. Their commanders eventually restored discipline, but the message was clear. They began to understand they had awakened something ancient and dangerous. The freed prisoners told stories that spread through the human population. They described torture and humiliation. They described children separated from parents. They described experiments conducted on living subjects. Each story added fuel to the fire burning in human hearts. Volunteers flooded military recruitment centers. Factories switched to wartime production. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to create weapons. The entire species transformed within weeks. They had wanted resources from a few colonies. Instead, they received the full attention of an enraged civilization. Admiral led the counterattack into territory. Her fleet grew as new ships arrived from Earth and the surviving colonies. She no longer commanded 300 vessels. She commanded 500, then 700, then 1,000. Humans built ships faster than the believed possible. They did not sleep. They did not rest. They worked until they collapsed, then woke and worked again. Their factories ran continuously. Their shipyards never stopped. The production numbers terrified intelligence officers, who reported them to the council. The council met in emergency session. They discussed options for ending the conflict. Some members suggested negotiation. Others proposed offering reparations. Commander argued for continued fighting. He believed the humans would eventually exhaust themselves. The council removed him from command. They had finally understood their mistake. They had attacked a species that became stronger when wounded. They had poked a creature that fed on conflict. Admiral received the request for peace talks. She read their message and considered her options. Her fleet now orbited 3 colony worlds. Her soldiers occupied 2 more. The enemy had lost half their military strength. Victory seemed possible if she continued fighting. She could destroy the empire completely. She could ensure they never threatened humanity again. Part of her wanted this. Part of her wanted revenge for every human who died in the camps. She met with the ambassadors on a neutral station. They offered complete withdrawal from human territory. They offered payment for damages. They offered return of all prisoners and remains. Admiral listened to their proposals without expression. Then she made her own demands. They would surrender their outer colonies. They would reduce their military to defensive forces only. They would submit to human inspections for 50 years. The ambassadors protested that these terms were too harsh. Reminded them of the children in the camps. The ambassadors agreed to everything. The war ended after 8 months of fighting. Humanity had suffered terrible losses. 4 million people died in the initial attacks and subsequent battles. Entire families vanished. Cities became graveyards, but the species survived, more than survived. Humanity emerged from the conflict transformed. They had remembered what they truly were. They were not just explorers and traders and peaceful colonists. They were also warriors. They were descendants of those who survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. They carried ancient fury in their blood. The Galactic Council watched the war with growing alarm. They had always considered the dominant military power in the region. They had always considered humans a minor species with limited influence. The war changed everything. Council members reviewed footage of human ships ramming enemies. They studied reports of human soldiers fighting beyond physical limits. They analyzed human industrial capacity that during conflict instead of declining. They reached a unanimous conclusion. Humanity was not what they appeared to be. Ambassador James Wright addressed the Galactic Council 6 months after the war ended. He spoke calmly about peace and cooperation. He discussed trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. His words were friendly and reasonable, but every council member saw something behind his eyes. They saw the shadow of what humans could become. They saw the beast that waited beneath the surface of every smiling human face. None of them forgot this sight. The Empire never recovered from their defeat. Their outer colonies now belonged to humanity. Their military existed only for defense. Their reputation among other species crumbled completely. Commander lived the rest of his life in disgrace. He wrote a warning for future generations. He told them the universe contained species that should never be attacked. He told them some creatures seemed weak until you hurt their families. He told them humanity was such a creature. Admiral Sarah retired after the war. She returned to Earth and bought a small house near the ocean. She planted a garden and watched sunsets. Sometimes she received letters from the families of soldiers who served under her command. They thanked her for bringing their loved ones home. She kept every letter in a wooden box. She never forgot the ones who did not return. She never forgot why they fought. Humanity continued expanding across the galaxy. They built new colonies and opened new trade routes. They made friends among dozens of species. They seemed peaceful and cooperative, but every species remembered the war. Every species understood the truth. Humans were kind and generous until you threatened what they loved. Then they became something else entirely. They became the nightmare that waited in darkness. They became the beast beyond control, and the galaxy learned to let sleeping humans lie.